Okay, we are rolling. Phoenix B, welcome to the Terrain Theory Podcast.
You bet. Good to be here, guys.
Yeah, it is great to have you here. Mike and I, for the last, I want to say month, 2 months, have really been diving into the conversation around nutrition, human diet, trying to answer this question: is there a species appropriate human diet? And we've got folks from all over the place. We're coming back to raw. Aajonus Vonderplanitz was a figure who I think catapulted both Mike and I into this particular space within terrain. This thing about nutrition. He really inspired us with his book. You worked with Aajonus, and I want to know, like, what was happening in your life when you met him. What was that experience like, meeting him and working with him, and how did it change your approach to diet and health in your life?
Yeah, you bet. Yeah, Aajonus was one of the most influential people in my life. He's up there with the Dalai Lama and another fella, Larry Byram, who teaches. He has since passed as well. Higher Alignment, which is a school coaching program for conscious relationships, and um, I I I have been a searcher for truth and a searcher for health all my life. And going back, my father was an immigrant from Budapest, Hungary, and as a kid, he trained us in yoga. We ate home cooked meals. He took us to the butcher shop, and we selected out the animals that he was going to purchase to bring home for us to eat. And so health was a really important part of my foundation growing up. I was a semi pro athlete. I was a highly decorated soldier in the military. And so performance, optimal health, being the best I possibly could be was kind of the world I was born into. At the time when I met Aajonus, I had finished my training with an Ayurvedic teacher in New Mexico, and was also in the process of starting my own little micro organic homestead where I grew up in the city, so I didn't have a lot of experience with nature except for what I from the hiking and camping I did in Boy Scouts and the time in the trenches in the military. But just really connecting with the plants and the animals was fairly new to me. And so this little organic homestead where I was practicing growing organic foods and chopping wood and trying to work with the seasons, the rhythms of the different seasons was it was inspiring for me, and I felt really uneducated about the process, and so I went to Ayurveda school, and I learned all about the way Chinese and the Hindi ancient cultures approached the season and approached health and approached this natural way of living. Um, Shortly after that, I was exposed to the eco village movement, and there was a budding eco village in North Carolina called Earth Haven Eco Village, and they gave some courses on permaculture and how to work with the land, and I'm kind of a dive in and do it kind of person. So instead of taking the courses, I just moved there and said, "Hey, I'm here. I need. How can I help? What are some jobs I can do here to learn about natural building and growing food and working with nature?" And so this was kind of all the environment that I was in. And while I was at Earth Haven, I met a woman who became my partner. She was a Chinese herbalist and also steeped in health and regenerative farming, and she was really sick. And the doctors had diagnosed her with malaria and Lyme's disease and chronic fatigue and fibromyalgia, Crohn's disease, the whole gamut of the list of the worst of the worst. And she had about 2 hours of energy a day that we would focus our time farming and building our home and things like that. The rest of it, she was just out of it. Well, a good friend of ours, a woman who introduced us to the eco village movement, Diana Christian, she had been living in California and was also a health enthusiast and had met Aajonus. And she came to us and said, she's a very fast talker. She said, "You got to meet this guy. He's you're not going to believe what he says." But to my partner, I think what this guy is teaching can help you, and it would be really important for you to get your energy back and to heal, because we got a lot to do in this eco village, and we just need you. And we did. We needed my ex-wife at the time, and so um, he had just published his book, and We Want to Live, and his first book, and was starting on his book tour. So we got the book, we read through it, and for me, it made a lot of sense. He was talking about, the first book is mostly his biography about how he helped his son after a near fatal car accident. And he was slipping into the hospital and feeding him butter and honey,
Butter and honey. Yep.
and disconnecting the IVs, and throwing the medications away when he could. Going under the radar. It'd be a lot different today, I imagine. If he was in that situation with his son in a hospital.
Yeah.
After all these security features have been established. But back then, he was able to do it, and his son survived. And not only did he survive, but he recovered from brain injury, and he's alive today and functioning. And so as a health enthusiast, reading that story and hearing his story about recovery from cancer, and already living in an eco village where we were starting to create this relationship with the earth and the animals and the plants. His story about the coyotes was just really, it was believable for me. And um, and so I told my partner, I'm all in. She was more skeptical than I was. She was very, very afraid of the bacteria, and but I think even more afraid of the stigmatism that she was going to encounter from friends and family, and the eco village we were living in was partially vegetarian and vegan. So there was a wide group of eating styles there, and we were going to face a little bit of confrontation by doing this. And so I just reassured her. I said, we I'll do this. I'll do it right with you. I'll eat everything that he recommends that you eat with you, and we'll get through this together. And um, we did it 100% pure. We did it by the book. And in 3 months, her diarrhea stopped, her vomiting stopped, her migraine headaches went from daily to once a month. Her energy level went from 2 hours a day to 4 hours a day. By 6 months, her fibromyalgia, the aches and pains and joint discomfort went away. Her energy was now up to about 6-7 hours a day. The migraines were now happening once every couple months. By a year on this diet, she was a new person. You,
Wow.
you just wouldn't recognize her.
Wow.
And all the while, I was eating the diet too, and our friends were watching, and people were just amazed at the transformation that happened for her. And so after that, um, it just transformed my way of looking at health. And the way that I was I was in the beginning of starting to coach people around nutrition with Ayurveda, and I just merged my understanding of Ayurveda with Aajonus's Primal Diet.
Let's pause and walk us through what she was eating and what you were eating so the listener knows exactly what this looks like.
And before you do that, what was she eating before you started this diet?
You bet. Um, so as I said, my track was Ayurveda, hers was Chinese medicine,
Yeah.
and so it involved, still we embraced organic food, and
Right.
it was and growing our own food. That was part of our mission at Earth Haven was to create our own gardens, um, but it didn't involve as much animal products. The foundation of it was grains and vegetables. So rice and dal on my end. I mean, I never was a vegetarian or vegan. And the teacher that I had, the Ayurvedic teacher I had, said that most of America had a vata imbalance, which meant that most of us had a nervous system imbalance. We had malnutrition. It was more of an ectomorphic body type, where we valued being thin and low fat and and um, and low calorie. And so he really helped me um, get okay with coaching people to eat heavy foods, high fat foods, um, warm, nourishing foods. And it was, still a mostly vegetarian and some meat recipe prescription that he would give people. So we would have cooked chicken, that had the broth in it. We would have beef that had the marrow bones cooked in it. We would have dairy that was warm. You never ate anything cool to treat vata. It always was hot, warm meals. And from her side, she was a little bit more vegan and vegetarian than I was. So it was again cooked, warm, organic, probably 75% vegetable and grain diet.
And then, sorry, and then how much, like, would you say, was there any processed food, like
Very
sugars,
little.
refined?
We had already eliminated processed food. Anything that was in a package and had more ingredients than the actual food in it
Yeah.
was already off of our menu.
Yes, you were already eating healthier than, 90% of the Americans just
I
by
think so.
cutting out. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. So
Yeah.
then you move to this primal diet. What does that look like? What did that look like?
Yeah. So what that meant was about 75% animal products, and it was an equal amount of fat to protein. So what that looked like for me was waking up in the morning and having, instead of some carbohydrate meal, uh, having a meat meal. And I was, a lot of people were kind of put off by that because they're used to breakfast meals being sweet and carb filled. I had spent time in the military in Korea. I'd spent time in Europe after high school, so I was used to other cultures that didn't have, coffee and donuts and waffles for breakfast. So that part was easy, but it was a lot. The name Primal Diet comes from the word prima, which isn't there is an association with our ancient food recipes, but most importantly, it's the primary or the first or the best diet for us to heal. So there's things in this diet that wouldn't necessarily, if we did an archaeological study, we wouldn't find them in human beings 10,000 years ago, like the green vegetable juice.
Mm.
The green vegetable juice, the Primal Diet supports juicing the vegetables, but not eating them. So you get all the enzymes and you get the nutrients and the minerals from the juice, but your body doesn't have to deal with trying to process the fiber, which it doesn't process very well,
Mm-hmm.
like it does with herbivores. So wake up in the morning, have a green vegetable juice first thing, wait a half an hour, 45 minutes, and then a pound and a half of beef raw. And at the time I was going for the least expensive cuts, because it was going to be a big change in our budget, going to this much meat. So I was going with the ground beef, and then I would have some raw butter with that, or raw cream, or a glass of milk, some kind of fat to balance it out. And then 45 minutes to an hour and a half later, a fat meal, which was usually a raw eggnog or a raw cream. Some of these would sound like desserts to you today, but raw cream pie was a healthy fat, and is a healthy fat. And so my daily menu was a bunch of meals throughout the whole day, starting with the green juice, then the meat and fat, then the fat, and then rotating through that cycle again. The green juice, the meat meal with fat, the green juice, and going through that 3 times a day.
All raw.
All raw.
Yeah. And when you're eating that raw meat meal, it's about a pound and a half.
It was for me. There are some individual guidelines for different constitutions of people as far as the amount of meat and the amount of fat that you would eat, or the number of times you would cycle through that a day, depending on whether you were a fast metabolism or a slow metabolism, or if your body was more higher pH or lower pH, or if there were certain heavy metals that your body was trying to detoxify. But in general, most people, when they come to the Primal Diet, they already have tried a lot of healthy diets to begin with. A lot of them were in the same situation that me and my partner were, where they had extended their reach with Chinese medicine and Ayurveda and the keto diet and other diets. Well, the keto diet hadn't showed up yet at that point, but most of them were sophisticated health practitioners and enthusiasts that had tried a lot of different things and were still hitting the wall.
Yeah.
And so with this understanding that most Americans have a vata imbalance, Aajonus would recommend real high amounts and calories in meat and in fat as people are getting started for the best results. So a pound and a half was a normal recommendation, for anybody that was underweight, and most of, again, the vegan and vegetarian community kind of had an edge up on a lot of people. They were fairly healthy, because they were already eating organic, and they were already paying attention to how to get the most nutrients in the food. The only piece that they were missing was this observance of the animal products. And so that community really was underweight and benefited well from a high calorie animal fat diet transition.
And your partner adopted essentially the same thing, but maybe less meat with every meal?
Same thing, even the same amounts of meat. We had a consultation with Aajonus shortly after we read the book. He gave us personal recommendations. Right after that, we flew him out we were in Asheville, North Carolina at the time, and as I said, he was doing his book tours, and with his book tours, he would go to different cities around the country and offer a workshop, and individuals that wanted consultations, he would do an iridology reading with them and give them a personalized recipe recommendation for them.
And is that what you received? Did you receive a iridology reading from him?
That's what we did. So we flew him out. We put on a workshop, um, and then after that, we became one of his stops each year that he would return to, and so we had kind of a growing Primal Diet community in Asheville, just like what was happening in L.A. and Northern California and Miami and Chicago, St. Louis, few of the major cities. He kind of developed this annual relationship with, where he would go there and teach and work with clients one on one.
Can you
We
can you
oh,
place
go
this
ahead,
in
Mike.
time? Is this 80s, 90s? When is this happening?
Yep, this is 2000.
2000, early 2000s?
Yep,
Okay.
it was the year 2000.
The year 2000. Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
And then can you walk us through that iridology exam? What did that look like? Because he speaks about this in his book, and we've never touched it as a topic on this podcast. So just really quickly, surface level, what does that look like, and what is it meant to reveal?
You bet. Again, going back to Chinese medicine and Ayurveda, these doctors, they used a lot of different modalities to try to assess what was going on and evaluate, um, look into the body, before X-rays and CAT scans to kind of predict what disease processes were beginning, and different body types, Vata, Pitta, and Kapha, often were um, identified with certain disease processes that were common for those constitutions. Like I said, with the Vata body type, there was a lot of brittle bone and malnutrition, neurological imbalances, um, um, digestion would often lead more towards constipation and dryness, skin problems. The Pitta constitution was more geared towards, Pitta is identified with fire, so fast metabolism, over digestion, those are the Crohn's disease, all sort of colitis, um, heart disease people. These are kind of the type A personalities, and so the ancient doctors would see these patterns. The Kapha body type was more sluggish and more prone towards diabetes and obesity and uh, metabolic slow metabolism, thyroid problems, things like that. And these doctors, they would use iridology. They would use pulse diagnosis. They would do palm readings, and then just looking at the person, the way that they move through the world, the way they present themselves, the skin, the eyes, the hair, the quality of the hair. It could be soft or it could be brittle, the color of the hair, all these things um, fed into a particular profile of a person that might be susceptible to certain diseases. And so Aajonus was familiar with a lot of these assessment tools. He first began his assessment doing palm readings in Venice Beach. And so thousands of people would come by and he would get a chance to look at their palms and then compare. He would ask them questions and be able to compare that to their health history, and over time be able to see these patterns that were occurring in people. Then he learned iridology. Uh, um, uh, Bernard Jensen was the person who was kind of the popular iridologist at the time, and he studied his works, and then over time he took these intellectual studies and combined it with his intuition, and again the feedback that he got from asking people questions, and kind of came up with his own assessment style. And so he was not only highly intelligent and knowledgeable about health and health diagnosis, and he wouldn't use the word diagnosis because we're not supposed to. That's reserved for the medical profession. But health assessment, and 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 also uh, tuned into his body from his own self experiments, and therefore developed a strong intuition too around how to work with people.
In Ayurveda, as you describe these constitutions, there can be, well, you tell me, it seems like there can be somewhat drastic differences in the type of diet that a person would eat depending on your constitution, right? Like there might be some similar meals that you would eat, but there's some drastic differences. But within the primal diet, it seems like it's kind of a one size fits all, right? There's not a ton of like variance within that diet. You're eating raw meat, you're eating raw animal products, you're juicing your vegetables. There might be some degree of quantity difference, but otherwise it's kind of the same, right?
That's a great question. So to answer that, we have to go back to what was happening on the planet, 5 and 7,000 years ago when Ayurveda and Chinese medicine, made their way. Um, most of civilization um, was in the process of this transition from a hunter-gatherer pastoral lifestyle to living in cities. And during that time, there wasn't as much variety of foods that were available to either one, whether you were a hunter or whether you were a farmer. If you were a hunter, you usually at least in this country, if you're a native, you were probably hunting buffalo, elk, deer, and a rabbit and groundhog, and you're fishing trout and salmon and catfish, and so um, that sounds like a wide variety of foods right there. It's just all meats. So in India and in China, where you know depending on what archaeologists or anthropologists you read, they'll substantiate that people move to the cities for safety, and, is one story, and the other is that the people in power, wanted workers to build these cities and these temples and these pyramids, and whether it was the Aztec or Mesopotamia or Egypt, there was this transformation where people were starting to embrace grains more than the nomadics. And in that process, the foods were fairly limited. If you're in India, it was rice and dal. And if you were in South America, it was corn, beans, and squash. And um, if you're in the Mediterranean, it was wheat. Wheat was the major crop. And so really back then, 7,000-10,000 years ago, people ate a fairly um, limited selection of foods. Now, when Ayurveda came in and Chinese medicine came in, they were looking at unhealthy people, probably because of this transition from uh, you know a heavily animal based diet to a more grain based diet, and these doctors, with the resources that they had, which was spices and herbs, they were trying to design some variations to help people's constitutions to be able to be healthy within those circumstances. So that's when you get this whole spectrum of sweet herbs and sour herbs and pungent herbs and bitter herbs and spicy herbs and salty herbs and different qualities in the vegetables, was to try to work within this system that was predominantly agricultural based, to try to make some changes to help people feel and be healthier.
Got it. And the difference with that and the primal diet is the primal diet is looking before that to say the hunter gatherer was really the healthier
Was
diet.
really the healthier diet, and there are plenty of archaeological evidences, especially in the Americas. The Coster excavations, they looked at this was around the St. Louis, Missouri River area, and they excavated out. Well, initially they thought it was 16 different civilizations, different levels in the ground, and they were able to correlate that the people that lived in those civilizations that were more agrarian, um, they had more brittle bones, they had thinner facial structures, they were shorter, and the people that what would happen is there would be a civilization maybe is 600 years or something in there, and they would start to show some of these negative effects, and so the civilization would crumble, and then they would go back to their hunter gatherer um, um, traditions, and then they do that for a while, and they get an abundance of food and nourishment, and they would grow in health again, and then they would try these more agrarian lifestyles again, and then their health would diminish, and so it's fairly correlative that a higher meat an animal product diet does equate to more optimal health.
Would you then say that something like the primal diet is the species appropriate diet for humans, or do you feel like there's room for all of it?
Yeah. Well, so then again, in the early 1900s, Weston Price, Dr. Weston A. Price, another um, pursuer of health, he spent 3 years traveling the globe and visiting traditional cultures. He was a dentist. He was really dismayed by the health of his patients that were coming in, and the disease and the dental caries, cavities that they had, and some of the musculoskeletal problems that they had in their jaws, and he just was confused about why this was happening, in one of the you know wealthiest countries in the world, and so he went around to these remote areas in the Aborigines in Australia, and some of the island people in the South Seas, and he visited the Eskimo in Alaska, and a remote village in Switzerland in the Lowenthal Valley, and the Maasai in Africa, and Samburu, and traveled all over. And what he was looking for was communities that had the least amount of exposure to the European foods, the flours, the sugars, the caffeine, the salts, all those things that were popularized by um, colonization in order to preserve food and you make it appealing to, again, depending on where you are on the conspiracy theory side of it. Some say that it was an intentional way to genocide, a lot of these natives. And also I've read a lot of accounts where the natives, um, they got addicted to it, and they want, after that they wanted it, and so they were fine giving up their elk and their buffalo and their hides and trading it at the Hudson Bay Company for sugar and tobacco and alcohol.
And alcohol.
But um, but what Weston Price found And this was also found by Vilmer Stephenson, who is an anthropologist who spent a lot of time with the Eskimos, and several other anthropologists, was that the cultures that had a diet of 75% animal products were the healthiest. The ones that were that top 2%, the healthiest, no dental cavities, nicely formed arches, extreme amount of energy, happier, no problems with childbirthing, no disease processes. Those were the ones that ate 100% or at least 95% animal products, and it was raw.
Mm-hmm.
And so those were the Maasai and the Samburu and the Eskimo.
Yep.
So you've worked with a lot of people over the years. Have you come across people where this diet does not work for them, apart from just the stigmatism of having to adjust to it?
Aajonus passed away in 2013, and he had a lot of clients that were on this diet.
Yeah.
Well, after he passed, quite a few, that had been on the diet 10, 15 years, started to lose faith. They had seen the progress being on the diet and embracing it 100%. But without him, he was available for phone call consultations. You could call him any day in Santa Monica between 10 and 12 Pacific time, and he would answer the phone and he would answer your questions. And so he was a wonderful resource for clients, that were getting on the diet and or staying on the diet. And once he passed, people felt really alone.
Yeah.
And they started going back to, at least the practitioner that was still there in their community, whether it was an acupuncturist or a naturopath, in order to get answers.
Mm-hmm.
And so when I started doing this, it was just 3 years ago when I kind of stepped out from behind the I just didn't really feel like I had enough experience or confidence to truly coach people like Aajonus did until 3 years ago, and that was when I contacted a few others that have been on the diet a long time that had also known Aajonus and had hosted him, and we started this project called Primal Diet Coaching, which has now been building and growing into what we're calling Primal Planets. And what I discovered, the first thing I did was start calling people. I inherited the Primal Diet website and the Primal Diet news list, and I contacted people. How are you doing? Are you still on the diet? What's been going on in your life since Aajonus passed? And it was really depressing because a lot of people, their health had diminished, and they had gotten off the diet. They had gone back to doing things that were available to them at the time. And so the first thing that I did was with some of these long-term people was encourage them to go back on the diet 100%. And when they did that, I'd say there's 15 people that had been on the diet a long time, that their health, they had dropped it, not dropped it entirely, but let some of the values slip, and their health was starting to diminish. And when they got back on the diet 100% with some support from somebody that could say, "Hey, yeah, I'm with you here. I know it's going to be awkward because you don't have Aajonus to verify this with, but I'll walk this with you," and their health turned around. And so now today we've got a cadre of people that have been on the diet, initially for that 10, 15 year period, that fell off of it, have gotten back on it again, and are now achieving the promises of the optimal health that Aajonus promoted. And the reason why it takes so long, and this, this is a reason why fad diets are hard to embrace, is because um, Aajonus said it. It takes 40 years for our body to achieve optimal health.
It's a
40
long
years,
time.
4 generations. And the reason, the way he came up with that number um, was through Dr. Francis Pottinger's work. He wrote the book Pottinger's Cats, and he was a research doctor, again, back at the same time as Weston Price. And, and he experimented with cats and mice and dogs and pigs and cows and, and humans. And what he did was he had test groups, some that he fed is with the cats, some that he fed straight raw meat, some that he fed a combination of raw meat, raw milk, and some kibble, some cooked canned cat food, and some straight kibble. And the you know the ones that ate the straight raw meat were the ones that had the best outcomes. But after 4 generations, the ones that ate the straight kibble, their hair was falling out. They were looking mangy. Their bones were getting brittle. Their demeanor was getting anxious and agitated. And by the 4th generation, they were no longer able to reproduce.
Whoa.
That was true with the rats. That was true with the mice. That was true with the dogs. And again, 4 generations for a human being would be 40 years. So he wasn't able to go through that. Francis Podger before he died, to see how that worked. But Aajonus did with himself. By the time he had written his books, he had been on the diet about 25 years. And by the time he died, he had been on a diet close to 40, 45 years. And so it was easy for him to be able to say, I still was going through these detoxes even after 25 years. I was still exhibiting some of these symptoms. 5 years later after that, those were gone. I still was having these other difficulties happening, but by 40 years, he had achieved that level of optimal health that he had heard about through Francis Podger.
Hmm.
And I experienced that with myself too. I've been on the diet now since 2000, so for 25 years. Every year, my health continues to get better. About once a year, I still have some heavy detox happening. Whether it's blurry vision or constipation or diarrhea or flu-like symptoms with aches and pains and just low energy, or my skin getting really dry and irritated, or my back muscles getting really tight. All these are would be classified as detoxifications. And after going through those detoxifications, my vision would get better, my skin would get softer, my bowels would get more regular. And so each time, again, one of Aajonus's mottos was if you're experiencing detoxification symptoms, if you're feeling sick, do nothing, do nothing, and just allow it to run its course. And then when you feel better, you'll have more optimum running systems, more optimum functioning cells in our body. And I've found that to be true, and I found that to be true with the people I work with too. That if they just do nothing and keep eating the primal diet, the symptoms will eventually go away, and they'll feel better than they did the decade before.
Yeah. Mike, go ahead.
As a couple things you said. It sounds like having the community support is integral, because this is maybe just because it's so outside of the mainstream. So to have that community support to fall back on, to reassure yourself, is crucial. And I think that would be true of any pursuit, really. Um, but one thing you've opened my eyes to, and this makes sense. thinking about some other people we've talked to, you're not just really eating for yourself. You're eating for your lineage and the community at large, like your family. There's that native idea of the seventh generations down the line that you can't see. It's not just about you. It's about the betterment of your line in many ways.
Absolutely. Yeah. This is absolutely not about me. This is
That's beautiful. Yeah.
this is to create an opportunity for my son and all the children out there, and it's not only a community human effort, but it's a community animal, plant, and planet effort, and that's where we came up with the name Primal Planets, because not only does this food help keep humans healthy, but it helps keep the planet healthy. There's again all kinds of documentation about especially nowadays with the GMO corn and
Yeah.
GMO soybeans, how agriculture is um, actually the cause of uh, I don't want to get into some of these political terms,
Right.
but it's definitely the cause of the destruction of the ecosystem in a lot of ways. And returning to an animal based, grass based diet adds carbon to the soil. It prevents erosion and runoff into the Mississippi River. It grows topsoil. It increases the microbiome of our environment, which is required for the bugs and the bees and the birds, and then the animals that eat those bugs and the bees and the birds to be able to thrive and survive, and all the way up the chain to the carnivores. And so this diet is not just an invitation to help future generations of humans, but also is an activist movement to bring bring what I like to say is heaven on earth, which is a more balanced, sustainable ecosystem on this planet.
One of the hangups that folks have around the primal diet is the consumption of raw meat and raw eggs. What do you have to say? What did Aajonus teach about that, and how do you help clients, potential clients, folks who are just getting into this, over that mental block?
Yeah. Again, usually by the time people get to the primal diet, they have tried lots of different diets. They also have been exposed to the propaganda, that created the food pyramid, and are already questioning, some of the laws and guidelines and the actions of the USDA and the FDA, and so um, the first step for people is usually raw milk, and
Right.
that movement is really starting to grow, and there's countless, again, studies about how um, disease is caused by pasteurized milk instead of the raw milk. So people are recognizing that the bacteria, the enzymes that are in the raw milk are beneficial, and people are already starting to recognize that we need to increase our intestinal flora so that we can digest food, so that we can think better, so our cells are receiving the nutrients and the vitamins that are available, but not if the enzymes are there, not if the milk is cooked.
Yep.
So taking that, from milk to all the rest of our foods is it's still a stretch for some people, but it's not as big of a leap as it would be for others. And so that's usually where I start with folks is show them all these wonderful recipes that you can do with milk and butter cheese, raw cheese, unsalted cheese. Um, Aajonus has several recipes of cream pies and butter pies and that are all made with raw dairy. And then usually you can appeal to the universality of raw meat, and most people are familiar with sushi, and most people don't have a problem eating oysters on the half shell, and so you can incorporate that into their diet, and without much effort or conversion. And then once you go there, um, you can start talking about the different cultures around the world, and the dishes that they have that are raw. For example, in Persia and Iran, they have a dish that's called kebab, and it's their national dish, which is it's raw goat with I think it has parsley and barley in it. Um, and you can go to Ethiopia, and they have a raw beef dish that they serve. And you can go to Italy, and they've got prosciutto. And you can go to Russia, and they have steak tartare, and so all these cultures, they usually have something, and you know it's available in American restaurants too. If you go to high end restaurants, they'll have it there on the menu. You can get steak tartare, you can get prosciutto, you can get kebab. Um, uh, and how do they serve that? And how is it that it's it's not um, uh, um, again, how the propaganda is so hypocritical, where you can go into a, a more upper class restaurant, and you can have these foods, but the people that can't afford to do that, are deemed that their cooked food is going to cause parasites, or cause viruses or bacteria, or some kind of infection.
So yeah, so you have a whole sort of system, a step system to introduce like raw meat, just by way of, hey, you're already doing it. We've already been doing it. It's safe. But there's still that mental block for a lot of folks. Like, I'm going to get food poisoning, right? You're talking about a raw hamburger,
Yeah,
right?
yeah,
There's nothing that it screams at you for most people. Again, I'm taking their side, not Mike and I. We've been doing this.
yeah,
We're sort of hip to the idea that um, germs don't cause disease, bacteria doesn't cause disease. But for the folks who are like, raw hamburger, no, thank you. Like, I will get food poisoning. What is the answer to that?
yeah,
What's your answer? What was Aajonus's answer?
yeah. That is probably the predominant question that I get. Again, most people that come to this, they're already okay with the bacteria and the viruses. They've been through the pandemic, and
Yeah.
they know that's not the deal. But yeah, the parasites is probably the last holdout.
Okay.
And what Mike said about the community is really important, because we do. We have hundreds of people now that are in our community that have been doing this for years, and none of them have ever gotten sick off of raw meat.
Right.
Myself, the things that have caused me diarrhea or queasiness have been eating too many eggs. I just would often recommend for people that have Crohn's disease to eat a dozen or 2 dozen eggs.
Raw.
People that have cancer, fourth, fifth stage cancer, 2 to 3 dozen eggs, because they digest very quickly. They digest in 25 minutes. They can get into your system, and you can provide those fats, essential fats, and proteins to the body
Yeah.
quickly. Um, I My favorite meat is pork. I eat pork. I eat turkey. I eat venison. I eat roadkill. I eat fish. I eat beef. I eat lamb. I have never ever had a symptom of vomiting or diarrhea from a meat product ever.
Any of those meats eaten raw, you've never been sick. You've never
Never.
experienced quote unquote food poisoning
Yeah, never.
from roadkill.
From roadkill.
Yeah. See, most people would just be like, that's wild, but you are living proof, as is your community.
And so, you can take people intellectually back to research and studies. And there's um, Dr. Joel Weinstock from the University of Iowa. He did experiments with, I think he's still alive today, and you can probably still find his YouTube videos, um, with whipworms, which are like tapeworms. And he was feeding them to his Crohn's disease patients. And what he found was that the parasites would do their job. And, Crohn's disease, the problem there is that the intestinal lining has been um, injured, insulted, whether it's from, the medical world would say that it's from bacteria that injured it. But, from our perspective and from Aajonus' perspective, it's the chemicals in the food that we eat, or coffee or salt or sugar, that is the irritant that causes that intestinal lining to get rubbed down and irritated, and eventually it perforates. Well, these whipworms, he found, would go in and eat the dead tissue. It would eat the scar tissue. It would eat the damaged tissue. And what that does is it creates an opportunity now for new cells to grow. And so he did this experiment with hundreds of Crohn's disease patients, and had 100% success. And patients that would come back to get their whipworms. And so, microbes, they've been used in all kinds of industries to help heal. When the Exxon Valdez tragedy happened, one of the remediations was to dump spores on the oil, because the spores they'll gobble up the chemicals, they'll metabolize it, and they'll excrete out something that's organic.
Yeah.
E. coli now is being used in cancer to help dissolve tumors. You can pay for the $5,000 for the treatment from your oncologist, or you can just eat live foods that have the bacteria enzymes in them that will help dissolve those tumors. So it's again, we're up against a lot of propaganda, and as time goes on, we're also up against a lot of established authorities that are painting this picture, and making it very difficult for our community to be able to be outspoken about what we do. And again, that's one of the reasons why this community, I feel like, is so important, because it gives us a place to be able to talk about things without fear of being blacklisted, or silenced, or even targets for the more popular agendas that are out there.
Yeah. The community that you've built, the work that you continue, the work that Aajonus has done, it's essential subversions of this war on germs and this war on microbes, the scapegoating of bacteria as the cause of all these diseases, when in fact, as you're pointing out, they are they are our friends, they are our allies, they are there to do a job.
Yeah, we're wanting to be allies with nature, not to go to war on our bodies.
And
That's
that's
kind of what seems to be happening, is we're declaring war on our bodies. Our bodies are attacking itself.
Yeah.
Our autoimmune system is attacking itself, and I just have a hard time um, accepting that. I think our bodies are doing the best that they possibly can to survive from all these toxic assaults that are out there in the world.
What did Aajonus think about disease labels? You mentioned Crohn's, fibromyalgia, Lyme's.
Yeah, yeah. And We Want to Live, he gives very specific remedies for each of these different diseases. And the bottom line for him was that disease is caused by two things. It's caused by toxins in our bodies and in the environment, and malnutrition. That's it. Toxins and malnutrition. And so the goal of the Primal Diet is to eliminate the toxins in our bodies and in the environment, or just limit the exposure. It's almost impossible. Some of the research these days about the PFASs that are found in polar bears and in Antarctica from it just evaporating up and raining down on different places on the planet. It's almost impossible to escape the chemicals these days. But to do the best that we can to avoid intentionally putting them in our bodies through vaccines and medications and food additives and preservatives and insecticides and pesticides and things like that. But then nutrition is the other piece. And the reason why it takes 40 years is because to achieve optimal health is because our skin, we have a whole new skin in 7 days. Our blood cells, they regenerate every 120 days. Our liver cells take 7 years. 7 years from now, if you and I have this conversation, I'm going to have a whole new liver, and you're going to have a whole new liver. Our brains take 40 years. And so our bodies, in their wisdom, are constantly taking the nutrients that we feed it and using them to make these cells. Well, if we feed it the most optimum nutrients, it can make the most optimum cells. So, we'll have fair skin cells if we eat food that has been processed with sulfates and nitrates. We'll have fair skin if we eat food that has been cooked. But if we eat food that doesn't have any additives, that is organic, and you can't go by USDA organic standards. That's a whole nother conversation. But food that is chemical free and it hasn't been cooked and has all the enzymes in it that's raw, and there's different temperatures for different products. For example, dairy, you don't want it to be over 104 degrees. That's when the enzymes start to, that's the temperature of a cow, is 104 degrees. Honey, you don't want it to be over 93 degrees. The bees in the hive, they'll start fanning the honey if it starts to get too hot in there. So different foods have different temperatures, but they're around that, around body temperature, for us. And the closer it is to that body temperature, the more enzymes are going to be bioavailable. And so when I create skin from those foods, I'm going to get the best skin cells possible and best liver cells possible and the best brain cells possible. So that after a period of time, our body is dumping the cells that are no longer acceptable and replacing them with the better ones. Every moment while we're speaking, that's what our body is doing. Is it's dumping the lower quality cells and uploading the higher quality cells.
Got it. 40 years. Go ahead, Mike.
What's the deal with salt?
Yeah. Well, again, if you go back to these traditional cultures, they didn't use salt.
Yeah.
They ate seafood,
right?
But they weren't mining or drying salt and using it to preserve their foods. And they didn't have refrigerators. They if they had an excess, they would dry it, or they would bury it in the ground. But it was really important for them to every day have fresh meat. So they would hunt, they would fish. If it was a bad hunting day or bad hunting week, then they would have this surplus of dried meats that they would go to eat. But ideally, they would find something fresh every day in their hunting and fishing, and that's what they would eat. So salt was introduced by the colonies, and got a wonderful blog I did on salt wars and how it was created. But the it's pretty much indigenous slave labor that mines it these days, and um, the horrors of the health of these people that are working in the salt mines is just it's just sad. It's really really sad. Um, I remember when I was a kid, my dad he had some tomato plants and he hated slugs eating his tomato plants, and so every time he'd see a slug, he'd pull it off and he'd put it on the sidewalk and he'd say, "Go get the salt," and so I get the salt, and I pour it on the slug, and I would all shrivel up and die, and that's what happens to all human life when you add salt to it. You look at the sides of the roads and the highways. I'm looking out my window right now, and they just salted the roads from a snowstorm last week, and all the grass that's within 2 feet of the asphalt is dead, and that's what salt does. That's why it works so well as a preservative, because it kills it. It kills all the bioactivity that's in that product. So you end up eating a food that is going to require your body to use its own digestive enzymes in order to metabolize it, versus getting the enzymes from the food itself, which is uh, Dr. Robert Howell. He wrote the book Enzyme Nutrition, and what he said is that we're given a certain amount of enzymes in a lifetime. Our body produces enzymes, and we're given a certain amount. Now, I believe that on the Primal Diet, you can actually go beyond that given amount. But what he said is that it's so important to eat raw foods, because we're able to garnish the enzymes from that food and not have to utilize all of ours. And that's what causes aging, is when we use all of our own enzymes up.
Got it. And this is the reason why Aajonus did not advocate salted butter or adding salt to a meal. It's interesting though, Phoenix, because in this space we're rubbing shoulders with folks in the West NA Price community, and many of them will advocate for adding sea salt to your water, for example.
Yeah. I've been part of the Weston A. Price community since its beginning back in the early 2000s, and I've seen a shift in it over the years. If you read Weston Price's anthem, Nutrition and Degeneration, he only mentions the word salt in there one time. None of the traditional cultures that he visited used salt. None of his remedies included salt. So it has been, there was kind of a split in the Weston Price organization some years ago, and what Sally Fallon would say is that she's trying to appeal to a greater audience. That and she, even in her book, she has a chapter, a 10-page chapter about raw meat appetizers. And in the side column, she talks about the benefit of raw meat, and how important it was and how vital it was to traditional cultures, and that the traditional cultures that did eat their meat raw achieved more optimal health than the other ones that Weston Price studied. and to help mainstream America move from the sad American diet. Um, she's introducing a big shift by just helping them see the benefits of fat, instead of the mythology about fat causes heart disease, and helping people see the benefit of eating foods without all these preservatives, and and giving them recipes to be able to make healthy, nourishing foods is big. And so her reach is much broader than I think Aajonus's was at the time. They both kind of came on the scene at the same time, and they butted heads. And what I'm seeing is that I've been to a lot of these conferences, is that the Wise Tradition conferences have salt sponsors.
Yeah.
They several of them that I've been to, um, you know, unfortunately, they didn't even serve raw milk, and they didn't serve raw butter, and so it's um, again, she's working with a lot of regulation, choosing a hotel to have these conferences, and the hotels often have their regulations and things that they're willing to do and not do. And so she's really, and she's working with politicians and trying, so she's in the thick of it all. And so it's a little bit harder, I think, for her to go this direction. And um, again, a lot of the people that come to the Primal Diet have been on the Wise Traditions diet, and they've hit a wall.
Mm-hmm.
And then they're like, okay, so what can I do now?
Yeah, I think that's a really generous stance to take. And Mike and I talk a lot about nuance. I think also there's stepping stones. And
Yeah.
I feel like certain folks in this community, this health community, are raising awareness to get the masses one step closer to something greater, something
Yeah.
better. And sometimes we forget that we too had to take those steps along the way to
Yeah.
get to where we are now. And I think we just have to allow for that. And we have to be thankful. We have to be grateful that those people exist. And they're like, this is a useful entry point towards something greater, something more optimal.
Absolutely. I don't usually coach people these days that haven't been through that series of self experimentation and growth, but every once in a while I will, and I'll refer those people to Wise Traditions. I'll refer them to the GAPS diet. I'll refer them to a keto diet, because I think that's going to be the best first step for them. And then, maybe 5 years from now or 10 years from now, they'll be ready for the Primal Diet.
What does working with you look like? If someone wanted to come into this community, be coached, what does that relationship look like?
Yeah. Usually it requires, being referred in by somebody who's already in the community, or somebody who goes to the website and purchases one of Aajonus's books, We Want to Live, or A Recipe for Living Without Disease. Then they'll get an invitation to attend one of our virtual Q&As, to receive our newsletter. And I like to, if it's somebody that doesn't have a referral partner, I like for them to attend one of the virtual Q&As first, so that I can see them, I can feel them out, and figure out if we're really a good match for each other. Again, these days it's, I work a lot with growers of raw food, and clients that are trying to have access to these foods, and some of these growers are in the limelight that about, that have gotten a lot of negative attention, and there's people that that don't necessarily have the best interest of these farms in mind as they investigate. what they're doing and asking questions. And so I really want to kind of do this vetting process for people. And once I meet them, and they go through the class, and I see that their intentions are true, and then they can be invited to come to to the Primal Diet conference, which we have each year, and meet other people. And then they can we've got a community chat, which is it's on Signal right now, um, which allows people to join in, ask questions, meet up with other people that are in their area, um, uh, look for resources. They also have access to the parts of our website that have a directory of other health practitioners and food and farm resources to be able to get the food. So once they've kind of gotten to know us, and we know that we're a good match, then they have access to the community and community resources.
Did you mention that you have a conference yourself?
Yes, yes. We had our first inaugural Primal Diet conference in 2024, and it was here in Southern Virginia. And we had people from all over the world that attended. We had the second one last year in August of July 2025, and then the one this summer is going to be June 10th, June 11th, June 11th through 14th. The first one was 3 days, and we upped it up to 4 days because there's so much to talk about and so much interest. So yeah, it's a wonderful opportunity. Not just and we it's more about curiosity and interest and the integrity of the person than it is whether or not you're on the Primal Diet to attend,
Sure.
because we're really wanting to have an open space for people that still eat cooked food to be able to come and feel comfortable and be able to cook food, in their lodging, and not feel intimidated or feel like that they're an outcast. And a lot of families that come too, you might have one partner that's been on the diet for a couple of years and the other hasn't quite done it yet, or maybe one of the kids does, or
Yeah,
none of the kids do. And so it's a really welcoming environment for people to come and learn and ask questions.
that's great. What do you call it?
It's the Primal Planets Primal Diet Conference.
Love it. Got to check that out.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah.
Well, Phoenix,
We'll have early bird registration happening probably in the next couple of weeks.
amazing. We'll help get that. We'll have to get that link out for folks
Yeah,
in this community. I know
yeah.
there's a bunch of folks who are listeners who adhere to this already. They're already, they're Aajonus aware, and they are on the diet, and they're huge advocates.
The speakers are our coaches, and you have people that like Jeff Slay, who was pretty much Aajonus's right hand man. He traveled with Aajonus to almost all the workshops around the world, and um, Kimberly Williams, who wrote the book Raw to Radiant. It's kind of a Cliff Notes version of Aajonus's work. It's a wonderful book, especially coming from a woman. That's it has in the past been because of a lot of the sensationalism. It's been more attractive to men, I think. But she really, and my wife, she's on the Primal Diet too. The two of them and the women that we have as coaches can help make it much more approachable for women that are wanting to do this.
Yeah.
And we at the conference we're really um, um, opposed and aversive to the sensationalism around it. A lot of these influencers that are chowing down on a raw liver and just showing people how bloody and gruesome they can be. That's not the tone that we're trying to accomplish. We're wanting to really make this look appealing and welcoming to women and families and children. And
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. You can fork and knife your raw steak, and you can drink your raw milk with your pinky out, right? Like it's
Absolutely. Yes.
yeah. Amazing. Amazing.
Yeah.
Well, Phoenix, we've taken up enough of your time. Th- we really appreciate you coming on, and you've given us a bunch of other names within the space that we're going to follow up with to just carry on this conversation and better explore this space. Before we let you go, though, we got to ask you a question we ask all our guests, and that is, what are your non-negotiables, the daily habits you do to tend your train?
Yeah. Well, I believe diet is very important. And I also believe that emotional and spiritual health are the other two pillars. And so my non-negotiables for me, um, in the physical world, in the diet world, are I just don't eat sugar or salt or caffeine or alcohol ever. I just avoid those. Those are kind of the four horsemen: caffeine, alcohol, sugar, and salt. And I make sure I don't eat those ever. Um, Also, on the physical world, I make sure I get a good night's sleep every night. Um, so I'm in bed by 10 o'clock, and I don't need a lot of sleep these days. 6-7 hours is really good for me, but I try to line it up with the daily rhythms. To go to bed when it gets dark and wake up when it gets light, and and then on the emotional side, um, being grateful. We say a little prayer at each meal, and we're grateful for the abundance that's in our lives and the beauty that's around us, and we apologize, when we transgress somebody, and make amends when we can, and just really clean up our side of the street, do the personal growth work that we need to do in order to keep our demons and shadows um, at bay, and so we can show up in the best emotional version of ourselves as we can. And then for me, spiritually, it's about getting getting connected to why we're here on this planet, and what Ben and Mike, what your superpowers are, the skills and the things that you bring to the table that are unique and beautiful, and how you can share your gifts with the community, and make it a more meaningful, fulfilling, healthy, sane planet that we live on. And so, I mean, that's the reason why I was just so tickled that you all invited me to be on this show, is because I see you're doing that. You're doing your life's work by bringing voice and bringing other people's voices to to our culture, so that we can make decisions that are going to be beneficial, not just to the human community, but to the animal community, the plant community, and take into consideration everything in the universe as we're making decisions in our life.
Yeah.
So thank you very much for hosting me.
Amen. Thank you. Phoenix, what are some of your go-to book recommendations for the listener who wants to learn more?
Well, obviously the number one and two are Aajonus's books. We Want to Live. Yeah,
Yeah.
you got there. For the person who that would be, I think, more of a one for somebody who wants to get into coaching, because it does give all the specific remedies in it for different ailments. But for somebody who's beginning and wants to understand the nuts and bolts of the Primal Diet, and hundreds of really wonderful recipes, his recipe book, the Recipe for Living Without Disease, would be a high recommendation. Another piece of the Primal Diet that's integral, and I would say people aren't on the Primal Diet if they're not taking hot baths regularly. And so there's a book called Hot Tub Therapy, and um, uh, I would recommend that one for folks. And then on um, if you're looking for more substantiation around raw food, the ones I mentioned earlier, Robert Howell's enzyme therapy, Francis Pottinger's cats, um, uh, Weston Price's nutrition and degeneration. And if you go into that book that you just held up, We Want to Live, in the back of it, there's a bibliography. And I encourage people to read all those that are in there. You have names like Dr. Mendelsohn, Robert Mendelsohn, and Samuel Epstein, and Anita Judith DeCava wrote the truth about vitamins and antioxidants. She was a student of Dr. Royal Rife, and she was a biochemist and studied the effects of cooked minerals, supplements and vitamins, versus food, and the impact that it has on metabolism in the body. And I'd say that's probably up there in the top five.
Yeah. I mean, he has Bechamp or Pasteur, which is, taking us all the way to the origin of terrain theory. He's got some great books in the back of this book.
Absolutely. Gaston Nicenes.
Yep.
The trial Gaston Nicenes, that's a game changer too.
Yeah, we had his widow on a couple of years ago to talk about his work and pleomorphism and somatids. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah, very eye-opening. I mean, foundational stuff for terrain theory, but also just for biology and understanding of who we are, what we're made of. Yeah. Phoenix, last question. Where can the listener learn more about you, get in touch with you, become part of this community?
You bet. So right now we have the primaldietcoaching.com website, primaldietcoaching.com. And that's a place to go to get in touch with me or any of the other Primal Diet coaches, to access some of these resources that I talked about, to set up an individual consultation. And primaldiet.net. Primaldiet.net. It also is WeWantToLive.com. They're both forwarded to each other. And that's the place where you can go to find all of Aajonus's works. All of his workshops, audio recordings that have been transcribed, and there's a search function there where you can search fart and find out everything that Aajonus said about farts. And it's also a place where you can purchase his books and audio recordings and materials. And then the project that we're launching right now is Primal Planets. primalplanets.com. And this is going to be the umbrella organization that is going to be hosting all of our events, the Primal Diet Conference that I talked about, the virtual Q&As, and the place that you can go to learn more about the Primal Diet lifestyle, about how to get away from those toxic chemicals that are in our environment, and ways that you can design your home so you're not exposed to the EMFs like we are these days, the clothing that you can wear, that's made out of natural fibers, things like that, to help people learn about lifestyle changes that we can make that are more aligned with the wisdom of nature.
And that's Primal Planets. That's PLANITZ.com.
Z with a Z.
Sorry, Z. Yeah.
Primalplanets.com.
Yeah, and we'll get all those links up in the show notes. Phoenix B, thank you for joining us on the Terrain Theory podcast. We appreciate you greatly.
Thank you, guys. This is such a heartwarming experience. Thank you.